If you're seriously thinking about moving abroad to Mexico or another country, the question of whether you'll be lonely if you're traveling alone or even as part of a couple is a serious, important, and meaningful question that deserves your consideration. I get a lot of emails and I'm so glad to hear from so many of you, and I love your comments too, so thank you so much. A lot of the emails I get are similar and they say nice things about me in my videos, so thank you very much for that. And they tell me a little bit about themselves, and then they tell me about their plans to move to Mexico or elsewhere. And they end up with a similar question, many of them. And the question is, I'm just going to read from one of the emails I got recently. He told me about himself and then he said, "However, there's a significant factor preventing me from pulling up stakes. It seems like I would be too lonesome on the road. That's funny considering I'm a fairly big introvert and I don't feel like I need constant human input, but yeah, I do need small doses now and again." That's my question to you. Your dogs aside, do you get lonely during your travels? As for me, while I enjoy interacting with the landlord, the neighbors, and the people at the grocery store in my travels, I really enjoy the sort of substantive conversation between two people who know each other and have shared interests and similar values. What do you think about this subject? It's a question I get frequently. I'd like to do what you're doing and travel, but I'm afraid I'll get lonely. I think any lone traveler would get the same kind of questions. After all, you're picking up your life, you're moving away from your family and friends. They're all in the rearview mirror and you're starting something new by yourself. Even if you're part of a couple, it can be jarring and feel a little bit lonely without community around. Everything is unfamiliar. The life you knew and the people you knew are all back there. And here you are enjoying something new in life, travel and exploration and adventure. Still, not having someone to share it with can be a real drag. It's true. And I'll tell you more about my own personal experience near the end of the video. Day in and day out, you might miss the friendships you had back home, the relationships that you see on a regular basis. It's especially hard if you're having a hard time in a location, like it's not what you thought it would be, or you feel stuck there. If you have no one to share that experience with, it could really prolong the agony. It can make you feel depressed and isolated. And then there's the issue of the language problem. For me, this is the biggest deal. After all, languages are part of communication, and communication is what makes up relationships. If you can't share your past adventures, your feelings, or your present adventures, or what you're doing now, how can you cultivate relationships? So learning the language wherever you go is a huge, important deal. Whether you intend to or not is a consideration when you choose to move to a new country with a different language. Obviously, until you're fluent in Spanish here in Mexico, away from tourist areas, it takes becoming fluent in Spanish to start having relationships with Mexicans, because not too many people here speak English, which, it's normal. It is nice to meet English speakers here in 𝐤𝐤𝐭, and I've developed some friendships, and that really keeps me going. I love it. It's nice to have friends after all those months of traveling. But I crave cultivating friendships with Mexicans, the locals, and it's going to take me getting better at Spanish to really do that. I talk with my gardener and my housekeeper, and I talk with other people out on the road and out in the world, but my Spanish is limited, so I'm working every day to improve it. The good news about loneliness on the road is that usually it's just temporary. Many people find that they're more social as they leave their home environment and start to build a new community in a new location. And expat groups all over the world are very welcoming and inclusive. And I found, especially in Mexico, they're full of fun activities. Even here in 𝐤𝐤𝐭, where there's not a big expat population, there are things you could do with other English-speaking people 2, 3, 4 times a week if you wanted to. There's no shortage of things to do with people who speak your own language as you learn Spanish. Here are some tips to make new friends and relationships while you're on the road traveling or when you're settling into a new place. Social accommodation. Depending on your age and what kind of traveler you are, you might like shared accommodation. Dorms and hostels with other travelers, sometimes from around the world, in similar circumstances as you, traveling solo. Shared housing can be a great way to get to know other travelers and make friends. I've had people invite me on their excursions and into their travel plans, and I've developed some great relationships with some of these people. It's true that the last time I tried staying in a hostel before coming to Mexico, I was kind of uncomfortable sharing space with strangers, and many people report this feeling as they get older. But when you're young, it might be just the thing. Caravanning. If you're traveling by car or truck and trailer or RV, there are often groups to travel with, and that makes the journey so much more fulfilling. I've not done this in Mexico, but if you do a search, you can find many opportunities and reviews of different companies and groups that do caravans in Mexico.
We're gonna go see if we can find something else to do in Park City besides shop. I'm sure there's some great hiking around here.
There are group day tours of individual places, food and drink tours, historical tours, cultural events, scuba and sailing tours. I had one woman years ago offer to be my photographer on one of these tours if I would be hers. She was on her own too, and we traded cameras for a little while each and got great photos and video of the experience that would have been difficult or impossible to get without each other. I really appreciated that idea at the time, and now I make that offer with other solo travelers on some special excursions. Along the same vein, gathering around a common interest, whether it's yoga, photography, or learning a language, getting together with others who have the same goals and interests is a great way to meet and get to know people. Often on a yoga or other kind of retreat, there's an opportunity for shared housing, and even if you don't want that, you can still see the same other people on a regular basis for a period of weeks or months and have the common interest. That happened for me when I took a multiple-week class in Thai massage in Chiang Mai, Thailand. The students didn't live together, but seeing each other every day at the school naturally meant getting to know each other and arranging dinners together and things to do. This next one is a favorite of mine, crewing on a boat. This one is not for everyone, but if you like sailing, it's a great opportunity. It's a different form of traveling, but I've had great experiences volunteering as crew on a sailboat and seeing different parts of the world that way. One advantage is that you can see places and things you could never experience if you were traveling by car or plane. Remote islands, out-of-the-way port towns, you really get off the beaten path. Another advantage of crewing on a sailboat is that it's generally very inexpensive, but you do have to know the other crew and captain well enough to feel safe alone on a boat with them. These are but a few ways to meet people while you're out on the road, and some of these relationships can turn into lifelong friendships with very interesting people like yourself. It's a different story completely if you settle down for a while and stay in one place. If you're in a town or city long enough, in many countries, including Mexico, there are often English-speaking groups that get together and get to know each other for just this purpose. They are usually very welcoming and sometimes get together for a meal, games, sightseeing, and excursions together, often on a weekly or bi-weekly basis. I've met some really cool women here in 𝐤𝐤𝐭 because of a regular ladies' lunch, and this is not an area drowning in expat or travelers from other countries. Still, there are activities available to meet others, and if you end up staying in one place, they can turn into real friendships. So, I think there are two crucial questions if you're worried about getting lonely traveling alone in a new country. The first is, will you be dedicated to learning the language so that you can create relationships with the locals and not just expat groups? And the other one is, how long will you stay in one place? Obviously, it's a lot easier to create new friendships and relationships if you don't move every week or every month. I get asked the question a lot, don't you get lonely traveling alone in Mexico? And the truth is, I have had a kind of unusual background history, and it's kind of inoculated me to feeling lonely, I think. I just don't feel that very often at all. Not everybody's like that, however. As we get older, we know ourselves better, and we know what we need from relationships. If you're the kind of person who needs daily contact with your relationships in person, traveling won't be easy for you. But if you know that you can survive on keeping connections through our digital advantages, making new friends, Or if you're one of those lucky people who are just charming and meets friends everywhere you go, then it will be much easier for you. You might find yourself returning home for a visit and your friends say, "You look different." And it's true, because you are different. You have gone out into the world and relied on yourself and enjoyed your own company. And that changes a person when you know that you can do that. I know it might seem bad. You think you're going to be lonely, sitting there with your little bowl of guacamole and looking at all the happy traveling groups, but sooner or later, a little abuela will come up to you and feed you some tamales and invite you to her cousin's wedding in Guadalajara. Mexicans are very friendly and very inclusive. The truth is, solo extended travel is not for everyone, but it can be so rewarding. Loneliness can be a hurdle, but it doesn't have to be a deal breaker. The key is to get yourself out there. Is there one thing that you really fear about traveling solo to another country? If there is, put it in the comments. This video has enabled me to sort of go down memory lane with the sailing and the caravanning and the world traveling. And thank you for coming with me on that little trip. And thank you so much for all your emails and comments. I will see you next time.